Buongiorno. Allora, vi devo portare un po'.
I would like to offer you our experience made at our research center in Conegliano, and I will also address you on additional experience made by Laleman in other pedologic-climatic conditions and countries with the same product and with the same modalities. The objective being that of trying to have ripe grape. We can think of a physiologic maturation of ripening, of course. We have a phenologic ripening, but that is not what the enologist focuses on, especially in modern winemaking. And then we also have technologic ripeness, which is based on the ratio of sugar and acids. We worked extensively on that, malic acid, tartaric acid, but that is no longer sufficient. So we have to go for aromatic ripening, which is a perfect concentration or ratio of all aromatic compounds, and phenolic also processes with anthocyanins and tannins in the best ratio. This has become more difficult due to climate change. You see here the development of temperatures in the area of Conegliano, which have increased by 1.5 degrees on average. Everything is made more complicated by the fact that, in addition to the increase in temperature, since the 90s, we have had variability in that we have periods when it rains intensively, and then we have very dry periods, as was the case in 2016, but also 2015. There was the same trend. And then 2014. We all remember how much it rained starting in June and all the way up to the end of August. And then 2013. So this is possibly what climate change really is, and it poses a number of problems that we have to consider. Well, let's not even talk about 2017 because it has not started nicely. What about the reaction by vines? The phenology of the vine changes as a consequence. Vines are a sort of way to detect things and measure things. It's like a thermometer. Here you see the vegetative cycles from up to blossoming. And we lost, since the 90s, 15 days, which might become as many as 22, 23 when you have very warm years, or even more in 2017. So this is the immediate evidence of what happens with climate change. In addition to that, we have this normal ripening process with sugar accumulation that happened gradually. This is the past, and that was accompanied by the accumulation in coloring substances. Due to the increase in temperature and also due to the accelerated ripening process, the two things are two separate phenomena, and we have phenolic ripeness, which does not accompany the other two, and also aromatic ripening at high temperatures, which with heat waves and dry periods, we have a detrimental effect, and no-isoprenoids are privileged when compared to other aromas. So the aromatic profile also changes. And these are the aspects, I would say, that we have to come to terms with. What can we do? What can we do in order to improve ripening and to slow down the accumulation of sugar and sugar substances vis-à-vis the coloring ones and the aromatic ones? You can have agronomic approaches and increase productivity in a programmed way. You can have a differentiated pruning activity in the winter, which means that you work at a vineyard level, and this is what Pagliotti's group and Boni's group are doing. And you have in the same vine different pruning approaches so that you have more or less ripe grapes on the same vine. And then you have post-veraison irrigation. Until some years ago, we had indications about irrigation saying that you had to stop at veraison and now it is no longer so. You continue irrigating, and then late toppings, and also intense de-leafing, and anti-transpiration substances are used. And then we also have a whole series of actions which entail that you directly act on secondary metabolites and ripening processes. We have phytoregulators such as auxin or brassinosteroids, which accelerate. Diego, I'm asked to tell you that you have to slow down because you speak too fast. This does not coincide with the possibility of translating you properly. Fine, says the speaker, and continue speaking very fast. There are also stimulators of secondary metabolites that are increasingly of interest for vine growers and winemakers. These are substances that stimulate the plant to metabolize secondary metabolites, which are those which can be more deficient or unbalanced if ripening is not regular. So we have products which come from fungi or bacteria, and also yeast extracts. And we have chemical organic products, and they all go in the direction of stimulating the synthesis of coloring substances, oftentimes self-defense systems of the plant. And also this is related to chitosan and methyl jasmonate, which are again compounds which are of interest.
Now, this being said, this is a slide that I took from one of Pagliotti's papers, and how you can help yourself with this leaf thinning, mechanical leaf thinning. And this is another picture that shows how these works at a genomic level with transcriptomics, which has now been described. Now, Lallemande in 2005-2006 tried to look for an alternative for leaf fertilization and started thinking of yeasts, studying them to see what effects they could have once they are distributed on the surface. They realized that these products had an advantage because they modulated phenolic maturity and aromatic maturity. So in 2007, they started studying these compounds closer. In 2011-2013, they started specific tests at an international level involving universities and research centers, including our own. In 2014, after approximately 7 to 8 years of tests, the product received registration. These are the places where around the world Lallemande ran experiments with the two products and everything at the raison stage, at which, on top of the most evident effects associated with sugars and acids, you also have the synthesis of the most relevant compounds that we've mentioned already, which started their activity at the beginning of the raison. The mechanism of action is the synthesis, as I have indicated, by the plant, by the vine, of secondary compounds, in response to the presence of monoproteins, beta-glucans, and chitin, and then the plasmatic membrane in terms of lipids, sterols, and proteins are all causing responses in secondary metabolism, the defense of the plant, that has an important role to play. Now, it is demonstrated experimentally that these compounds have an effect at a gene level. These studies carried out at Bologna demonstrated that treatment with these two products, well, actually it's two, because one is for cloning substances, coloring substances, and the other one is for aromatic compounds. They stimulate the production of compounds, and you can immediately see, and it's the two charts on your right, they also activated the enzymes that synthesize interesting substances. So this activates the gene. It is now demonstrated confirming all the initial assumptions. Now, to be more specific, here's the first product. Actually, I can't even remember the name. I had a note here, but I can't see it any longer. It takes 2 treatments at the beginning of a raisin, 5% of raisin, and 12 days later, the second treatment. So here you see the results, for instance, for Syrah, tested in Hungary. The coloring intensity is clearly positively affected by the treatment using this L'Alvigne Mature, which is the name of the product I was trying to come up with. In terms of coloring intensity in the wines, in the grapes, and therefore also the anthocyanins. So you had a first harvest, which was a pre-harvest, the second harvest at the right time, and then the third harvest slightly late. Now, if correctly managed, or even if you harvest slightly late, the beneficial effects are kept. The same experiment also tried to assess the reason for this increase in coloring substances, and one of the possible explanations was the thickness of the skin. In both vintages, there was an evident increase in skin thickness, and although that was not always confirmed, in other terms, if it's not always confirmed that a thicker skin corresponds to more anthocyanins, this proved true in this case. On top of anthocyanins, we also measured total stilbenes, including resveratrol, which are substances associated with the protection of the plant. The thickness of the skin and its implications were confirmed by the University of Turin on white as well as red varieties, confirming what had been done by the research group that had tested the products in Hungary in terms of coloring and aromatic substances for these 3 wines. Coloring substances extraction during skin contact. The inactivated yeasts were shown to be able to better extract coloring substances with positive effects onto the final product. This is Tempranillo, once again total anthocyanins for grapes and wines. Malvidin in the grapes, total stilbenes and resveratrol specifically. In all these categories, the effect is positive. Effect of the treatment. Same applies to methoxypyrazines, particularly for Sauvignon and Merlot here. The importance of having softer, less green, less aggressive wines, well, that was achieved here. At our research center in the Piave area, we tested these treatments on Merlot for 4 years. We had a control and a sample in 2013 and 14, and in 2015 and 16 we also added a sample with leaf thinning. We had never found differences in terms of yield, bunch yields between the control and the treated part, and also in terms of sugars on the main metabolism. It does have no effect. There's no major difference here. So in terms of sugars, pH, and acidity, where you see more differences on secondary metabolites, such as flavonoids, anthocyanins, total, and extractable. But what's really interesting here is that in the case of leaf thinning, or thinning in any case, thinning in this case, there's an increase of sugars against the treated sample, but in terms of coloring substances, there's no significant difference between the treated, the sprayed, and the thinned samples. So the advantage was that we didn't lose any yield, because generally when you thin, you lose 30 to 40% of the grapes. You would eliminate 30 to 40% over the 2 years. So we didn't lose any grape yields, and we kept our sugars reasonably, but we have a larger amount of anthocyanins compared to the control. So that tells us that actually we can produce more grapes with fewer sugars compared to the grape-thinned samples with the same amount of anthocyanins. So it's pretty positive. This is the sensory analysis, on average between 2013 and 2015. You see that these are rounder wines, smoother wines, more enjoyable, better balanced, with a better balanced phenolic maturity. Now, this all with the advantage of having the same yield per vine as the control, same amount of sugars, perhaps little less acidity, but this was never a significant difference, in everything can be obtained by leaf removal or bunch thinning or other agricultural practices that might be more costly to run the vineyard. Now, in conclusion, we can say that these wines proved to have more volume, more body, more smoothness, and better overall quality associated by less astringency, bitterness, and aggressiveness, among others. The other treatment was for a better balanced aromatic maturity, with the aromatic expression of the grapes being preserved. These tests were carried out in South Africa. They worked particularly on white wines and tiles. The scientific outcomes are pretty evident in that they show that just like what we said about coloring substances, aromatic substances benefit from this treatment at veraison and 15 days after veraison. In terms of glutathione, this important substance for the preservation of aromatic complexity, because it's an antioxidizer, which is particularly important in preserving the aromas, it was observed that here again there was more glutathione in the treated samples. In the years between 2013 and 2016, we tested the same parameters. Here, there are no meaningful differences in terms of the macro composition of the grapes, glera in this case. But then, when you drill down and look at the details of the entire spectrum of aromatic compounds, the terpenes and norisoprenoids, in particular, you see compounds that are enhancing the overall aromatic quality of the wines compared to the controls. The terpenes in all 4 years were beneficially affected in 2013, 14, and 15 and 16. Same applies to benzenoids, although it's less evident in that case, but it's also very evident on norisoprenoids and some compounds benefiting particularly from the treatment. Here again, the wines are better balanced, more enjoyable, with floral flavors and aromas associated to the presence of terpenes. Glera is not particularly aromatic, but the fact that you can improve the olfactory characteristics, the bouquet, is particularly important. The same holds true with Pinot Gris, which is more or less overlappable. Also in terms of response. When it comes to red wines, the experiments carried out in different environments and on different varieties confirm that there's a beneficial effect on polyphenols, total and extractable anthocyanins, and tannin polymerization or cross-linking. There's no effect on yields, sugars, pH, total acidity, at least macroscopically. In terms of the grape quality, the skins are thicker, that perhaps account for the prevalence of anthocyanin, and also the degradation of methoxyperazines leads to less herbaceous wines with a better maturation. As for the second product, which is improving the aromatic profile, there's an increase in glutathione, improving the antioxidizing performance in the grapes, and also it favors aromatic precursors, particularly those that control floral and ripe fruit aromas. We carried out 4 years of tests in the hills of the Glera and also in the Piave area, and so that confirms that there are secondary metabolisms which are stimulated by the presence of certain compounds, in this case, the compounds that come from these dried yeast. And so I would say that our experience helps us say that maturation and maturity can be controlled not only through agricultural practices, but also by using these products in a much simpler way, with less effort on the part of the estate, with results that were consistent despite the difference in the weather conditions. Thank you very much for listening so attentively.